Well, we could start with the step back because
Yeah.
I've kind of sensed an increase of attention over the years in politics. It's kind of always been a blood sport, and it's taken on different modes throughout the U.S. history. But um, it seemed like um, in the last 10 years that it's been more contentious.
Mm.
And then you can see it in different forms. But um, I guess I never really dealt with low-level stress and anxiety. But so kind of going through a little reformation in my life as far as how to deal with that. And I just had to step back from politics for a while and say, you guys do whatever you want to do out there. I'm just going to chill and not be influenced by other people's opinions and the strife that goes along with it. So I tried to step back for about 3 years, and it helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 years. So when did you start the step back?
Well, we had the election coming up a year ago, and people gearing up and talking about everything that's happened for the 3 years prior to that. And so I thought, get up to speed a little bit, find out what's been happening while I alienated myself from society in a certain way. So
Well, isolated, probably more like it.
isolate, yeah.
Yeah, I guess both works. But
I
yeah.
don't want to be alienated, I guess. Nobody wants to.
Nobody wants that. So okay. So you start 3 years ago from this year, basically.
No, I got back into it about a year ago just because of the
okay.
election coming up.
Mm.
And of course, everybody talks about what's been happening with, the people in charge over the last, 3 years, 3.5 years prior to that point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I remember you and me were talking about this earlier the other week. I think I remember you were saying you were taking a break. I think about 2020-ish around there. And then you got caught up later on last year, it seems sometime. So
yeah.
yeah, nice. So yeah, I was for me, I try to follow some different people on Twitter, different people on YouTube, and there was a point when I was a young adult where basically I was like watching the Ben Shapiro show every day. And that would be like an hour show I just would watch and to get my news for politics stuff, especially during Trump's first term, which I got into politics about 2017, early 2017. And we can go, I actually want to go into it a little bit later, but yeah, that's where my start was. So it's been a little under 10 years just diving into it. But at some point I had to take a break because I couldn't, it was a lot getting inundated with that stuff every day, willingly.
Right.
And then, of course, it's around you all the time, or depends on who you hang out with, or your friends or family or coworkers or whatever. People usually want to escape from that kind of thing. So I needed to escape from that. And so I took a break from all politics stuff for a little bit and just dived into leisure stuff. And then eventually it called me back. Some big thing would happen and I would check in and see what's going on.
Well, there's just this increasing spirit of contention, I guess it is. Even when you would listen to somebody that's really politically savvy, and they get caught up in, on both sides, and they want to persuade you that this is something really passionate they're about, and it's important, and they're trying to communicate what they believe. But when you're caught up in such high contention, I think you lose some of the effect that you have. Anger is not a good motivation to be for something or be against anything, and it's something that should be good that you're for. and not just because you're angry that somebody's doing something you don't like.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be a motivation.
I guess I've always been a contentious a-hole. I never really had that problem, I guess.
That's why I like you.
I wasn't always political. I think I tried to remain pretty much apolitical despite having, more or less conservative values from the get-go. I always tried to remain more or less apolitical because it seemed like it was all a game to me. It seemed like, but then, around 2016, when I started taking note of it, the Trump starting to run for president. At first it was just like, oh God, the you're fired guy is going to run for president, huh? How much worse can things get? How much more stupid can politics get? I'm glad I don't pay attention to that stuff. And then I started seeing the reaction of everyone else to him running, and it was like, wow, he's like exposing a lot of things that I hadn't really seen before. So at that point, I was like, I need to start paying attention to this stuff because it's, started pointing to some things in society that I hadn't really paid attention to that, have become, have turned out to be kind of important in recent years, like
important from the fact that it has an impact on other people's lives.
Yes. Like things that shape how we do things in this country, how we see other people, and it's like our morals and stuff,
Right.
And so at that point I was just like, I need to start paying attention to this stuff. And so the fact that the contention sort of ratcheted up at that point never really bothered me because I was like, I've always been contentious.
Good for you.
I enjoy. I guess I'm unique in that regard. I enjoy inflicting misery upon other people with my opinions, and people trying to do the same to me. Like I welcome it. It's like, come on, bring it on.
Enjoy the fight,
Yeah. So
Right.
I've always been like that. So
Right. Well, I've been around for a few years, and it's funny because you watch people like in the 60s that disagreed, but it wasn't to the point they couldn't go and have a beer later on. Not that that's something I would do, but I mean, you could still talk to them and just say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I definitely don't agree, but it doesn't mean I'm going to cast you from society or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is a lot of the contention, I think, is not as widespread as people want to say it is. Because the thing about the internet is the loudest voices
Right.
are not always the majority.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you have a lot of things in the internet, in media in general, where you have all these like, oh, I'm casting you from my life because you disagree with me politically. But I don't think that's as widespread as people necessarily might believe it is. Because what's interesting is, despite being a contentious a-hole, I've never...
Tell us more, David.
I've never broken up a friendship or anything like that over politics.
Right.
And I mean, I'm pretty darn opinionated, and I always have been. And so you might expect that it'd be harder for me to hold a conversation with somebody who's pretty like diametrically opposed to me ideologically. But what I've found is it's not that hard. And as long as they're willing to still have the conversation, I'm still willing to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And for the most part, when I'm in direct contact with people, they like they're willing to have the conversation.
Mm.
I've the only people I see like wanting to cut someone off completely over their politics is mostly been like in the realm of, you know, the crazy people who are really loud on the internet.
Yeah.
So I think while the contention certainly has ratcheted up in the political sphere, I don't think it's necessarily as bad as people make it out to be. I think part of that is we're so much more saturated by media nowadays. We kind of sometimes, I think, lose the ability to distinguish between that and reality.
Right.
But I think the reality is people are still willing to, people are still willing to go and have a beer afterwards if they have a political disagreement. It's just, I think media and the internet are trying to convince us that they're not.
Right. Definitely the loudest gets the most attention. And they're capturing all the media attention. So that's unfortunate, but I do see a difference, but I don't know if it's just what people are focusing on from a media standpoint. But we don't have a balance of political opinion necessarily in our area, so we're not really confronted with everyday aspects of that.
Yeah, part of it too is like you go to places where people are more tightly packed, bigger cities, more populated areas, you're more likely to get more strife there. And I think that's always been the case. Now people are starting to pay more attention to it. Because I think people where highly populated areas have always been contentious places filled with strife, I think. And I think what's happened now is that's taken on more of a political element, but it hasn't necessarily, but the behavior hasn't necessarily changed. It's just now over politics instead of, somebody cut me off in traffic,
Right.
Yeah, and that's something that we talked a lot about on this podcast, actually, especially the opening several episodes, was to disconnect yourself from the internet and just the noise, in quotes, out there, because there's so much of it that it makes your attention gets carried away and you lose track of what's important, especially what's in real life.
Right.
And it's just really important to, you should stay informed to a certain extent, but don't let it become, well, kind of like what we talk about church today, don't let it become an idol in your life, because it can easily be that like, oh, well, I'm going to devote this time specifically every day, which there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but don't let it be the most important thing in your life, and don't be responding to people online the most important thing in your life. There's greater things that are far more important than that. So, but it does remind me of one thing. I was watching a video this week about the Nintendo Switch 2, which is coming out next month. And as every little pockets of the internet, there's always fandoms that are kind of crazy and kind of mean and kind of out of control. And sometimes Nintendo fans, as people would say, are quite contentious in themselves and always hate Nintendo, but they just like in Sopranos and Godfather, it's like they got me and they brought me back in, or something, whatever the quote is. But because of nostalgia and all this stuff, and Nintendo's been around a long time. But anyway, there's a guy called JDX Coffee I follow on YouTube, and he does these like conversational videos where he makes coffee and just talks about games basically. But he had an experience when he went to GameStop to go pre-order the new Switch. And he went into detail about what it was like and how cool the people were there, and he was nervous because he didn't know if he was going to get one or not. But the main thing he brought up, which really stood out to me, was he said, "Man, you see all this like hate and like contention online, and it's all over the place. It's everywhere. But man, when I went to go pre-order that, we were all excited. There were super cool people that were like, hey, no, don't cut in line. Like this guy was here first, And even like when they opened the doors to the store in the afternoon and they let everybody in, they were super chill, super kind. Everybody was like, there for excited for the new thing. And yeah, they might not get one because of limited quantity, but it was a camaraderie thing. and kind of called back to like the days of midnight releases and kind of gaming events that got people really excited. And that really stood out to me. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And it was cool because he then dived into and just said, you don't really see that online because like he brought it up in the video. The loudest voices will get the most attention. And usually it's
The haters.
the haters. What was I going to say? It was the haters and those who are driven by anger. Yeah. So, and it goes into anything, gaming, politics, toxicity in general. But yeah, that's just, it made me think. I'm like, huh, it's not real. Just because what you see online isn't always real life, basically. So,
Right. So I think looking at politics, a lot of it is looking past what people are saying or how they're saying it and try to figure out, and just from experience, you can figure out what people's motivation are. Because, a government position, even if you're elected or you're hired to be a bureaucrat or something, it's really a servant position.
Yeah.
And it's not like necessarily a high and lifted, exalted position.
Not nowadays. No.
It's not supposed to be.
No,
But that's what it's really designed to do is listen to what people want and then provide that to them the best way you know how. But if you listen to somebody long enough, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak.
That's right.
They usually eventually reveal what their motivation is, and you can kind of you have to read between the lines most of the time, and to figure out what's this guy's coming from, and he's saying one thing. But if I follow somebody long enough, I can say, okay, I know what this guy's attitude is, where he usually ends up actually doing in his position, then you have to just get past the lies. And because now politics is more about lying to get what you, or the position you want, and then you could do whatever you want after, everybody leaves the room and you're actually making the decisions that affect other people's lives.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's unfortunate. The unfortunate development of politics has been the trend of promising people one thing to get the votes and then doing the complete opposite thing. I remember back in when Obama was first running for president, I remember him campaigning specifically on bringing our troops back home because, Bush 2.
Bush 2, the sequel.
Yeah, Bush 2.
I've heard that before.
Kicked off the
just get me.
kicked off the war in the Middle East, and it kind of turned into a forever war. And Obama was campaigning. I think he was running against McCain the first time around.
Yep, McCain. Yeah.
And yeah, so he was like trying to make himself appear. He was basically trying to get votes. He was like, yeah, this war in the Middle East business, we got to get our troops out of there. It's none of our business. We're not the world police kind of thing. Because, people we're starting to get a little tired of it at that point.
Right.
But then he gets elected, and what does he do? The complete and opposite. And he does not pull us out of any Middle Eastern conflicts. In fact, he ramps up even more Middle East conflicts by his actions. There's a reason why one of his nicknames was Drone Striker in Chief. Like the amount of drone strikes that he authorized was a shocking number for someone who ran on being like anti-war and pro-peace,
Hmm.
you know? So it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, I think it's been done for a long time, you know, because people never really looked too deeply before into who they were voting for, or at least they didn't to the degree that they do now. I think there was a lot more trust in media, and a lot more like, oh, he says this, so he must want to make good on it, you know. So I think that's the sort of thing was always happening, but there was a lot of layers in place where people were just not quite recognizing it, you know. And that was a big moment for me when I saw that, because I was like, when he was campaigning, I was like, oh, this Obama guy seems pretty cool, you know. It's like, yeah, wants to pull our troops out of the Middle East. I'm all for that. Wants to, you know, wants to turn things around and, you know, move us forward. And I was still apolitical at this point, so I wasn't necessarily sold on Obama, but
You weren't biased.
I wasn't really sold on Obama, but he seemed like a pretty cool guy, you know, as like, yeah, I could get behind that. I hope he does that if he gets in. And then he got in and he didn't do that. He didn't do any of that. In fact, Obama could be more closely compared to George Bush than he could be to any other president. He was basically like Bush 3, but black. You know, and he campaigned on literally the opposite of that. He's like, yeah, I see all this stuff that people are angry about, that the Bush era policies that people don't like, the wars, the you know, bailing out these big corporations and all that. What does he do? Wars and bailing out big corporations.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of see 3 categories that society looks at electing a leader. You got foreign, and then you got economic, and then you got social. And I think, at least for Obama, he was more concerned about the social, but he would say whatever he had to say about the other 2 things to you know, get elected and find favor with the majority of the people. But that's the hard thing, is seeing through what people are really trying to accomplish. And if they have a track record, you know, it's pretty easy to, especially now, looking up stuff, finding out what people have done with the authority that they've been given. So,
yeah, and that's something I remember specifically about Obama, just growing up, because I wasn't really politically aware. I just would just see what's on the news or what you would listen to down on the radio, and it was funny. While David was talking, I was thinking about how growing up, when there was like a new Supreme Justice going to be nominated, or when there's something they were criticizing this about Romney or whatever, and you told me, well, the reason why they're criticizing Romney is because we're watching MSNBC, and they don't like Republicans, that kind of thing. So they're probably not going to have a very light view of Romney. And then you said, oh, well, Obama will probably put in a justice that is very much of his opinion and is of his side of the aisle and that kind of thing. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, it's okay. Well, whatever. Yeah, I wasn't really paying super attention to it. But then, like, nowadays, like in the 2020s, I remember experiencing some of that and seeing all the advice you gave me or the pointers you put out. And I remember, I knew about this stuff 20 years ago. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Like, somebody would put in a justice like this, or the news would say this about people. Especially when Trump got elected, there was, you know, on all fronts, it seemed like everybody was after him specifically after he got elected. And I remember waking up that night and I'm like, oh, I wonder if he won. And he won. Or I wonder if he lost, is what I was assuming. I checked my phone and it says he won. I'm like, no way. Huh, interesting. And then I went back to bed. Like, I went to sleep. Like, I'm going to continue on with my life. So it's an interesting